Hello everyone, watching today's second video. So we're on 5-day forecast. You can find the video chat here on the homepage. Just scroll down the page a little bit and it's above Snow Desk. There's also a written version. You get that from buttons at the top of the page. It's going to be quite a quiet 5 days ahead generally, and the problem is going to be mainly fog. I think you're going to have some dense fog coming up in the next few days. Could be a little bit disruptive actually in places in terms of sort of travel, maybe flights as well. So might get a bit fogged up, I think, in the next few days. However, big changes by the end of the 5-day forecast period as it turns wet and windy from Sunday to Monday, and then eventually a lot colder as well. And we're going to pick up the storyline beyond the 5-day forecast period for today's second video. It's going to take us through a 7 to 10 day time frames. We'll also have a look at Beijing Climate Center the next 40 days, because I haven't looked at that for a little while. We're going to begin by having a look at the stratosphere. Of course, we have been talking about this a lot in the videos lately. Signs with the GFS model of a sudden stratospheric warming over the past few days. So this is the latest forecast from the GFS model. This is the 6 o'clock run of the GFS from website meteorseal.fr. These are the forecast stratospheric temperatures at 10 HPA, which is one of the top levels of the atmosphere over the North Pole. Where we've got these blue and purple colours, that's where we've got the cold temperatures in the stratosphere over the pole right now, and in around a week's time we're going to still have these cold temperatures at 10 HPA over the North Pole. Let's run through and see if this run produces a sudden stratospheric warming. We can see that by the 20th of January, day 10, we're starting to get some warmer temperatures, greens, yellows, appearing across particularly eastern parts of the Mediterranean. That's where it all begins, a long way from the Arctic, but that pushes northwards in towards Russia and Siberia, so that by the 22nd of January, it's strengthening as well. So we've got these yellow and orange colours appearing across Russia and Siberia at 10 HPA. Still very cold over the pole with both blue and purple colours. But as we run through, we find that the reds very quickly appear. This is 24th of January, when a sudden stratospheric warming event is taking place across Siberia and beginning to penetrate in towards the North Pole itself, and that continues up to the end of the GFS one, which is 26th of January. We've got those red colours pretty much moving into the top of the North Pole. That's a genuine sudden stratospheric warming. Notice the blues and purples are being pushed down into the mid-latitudes, so we've got a displacement of the polar vortex, if you like, certainly at the stratospheric level. Anyway, probably not at the tropospheric level, where weather is taking place at this point. But with its roots up in the stratosphere, essentially the root is being pulled up and shoved down into America and into the Atlantic, which is allowing these warm temperatures at 10 HPA to push through into the North Pole. Now the question is whether this sudden stratospheric warming is going to actually happen, because at the moment it's still a long way off. It begins not that far away. It actually starts around here with these green colours through the Mediterranean. That's within the day 10 time frame. That green just there is a very slight warming that's occurring over the Mediterranean on the 19th of January. So that's within day 10. But the actual sudden stratospheric warming itself, the way it develops it into that major warming, that's still all a very long way off. And at the moment, it's only really the GFS and its ensembles that are showing this potential. We aren't yet seeing signs of this, really, with other models. So this is from the University of Berlin website. This is the temperature forecast at 10 HPA, again, in the top level of the atmosphere and the stratosphere over the North Pole, this time from the ECMWF. So this is the day 10 chart just here that you are looking at from the University of Berlin website. So this will be taking us to the 19th, actually, the 19th of January. And what we see is that we aren't really getting any signs yet of a major warming event starting to take place. So this is the North Pole just here, where we've got this black cross here, that is the actual North Pole itself. So we've got the very pale sort of creamy colours down here. That might be the start. So that's getting close towards the Mediterranean. That might be the start of what the GFS is picking up on at around the same sort of time frame. But eventually it intensifies it and pushes it in that sort of direction, and then it develops into a major warming around here sometime around the 23rd, 24th of January. That might be the start of it, but there's not enough evidence there to suggest that the ECMWF is yet picking up on this sudden stratospheric warming, really because it's too far away yet. So we'll probably know more from the ECM around Friday or Saturday. That's when that time frame of around the 23rd, 24th of January will start to come into the ECM time frame. Also, the UK Met Office products, we can't see this, but the forecast at the UK Met Office, they have their own model, the GLOSY 5 model. And from what I've heard, there's no sort of signs yet that GLOSY 5 either is showing this sudden stratospheric warming. So at the moment, we do need to stay very cautious about it. Obviously, the GFS is picking up on something, because this is appearing time after time, run after run. We keep getting this very significant warming event being shown by the GFS model for this final week of January. But I think we need to wait just a little bit longer before we start taking it too seriously, and we need to find some support turning up from other models. I think that's the next critical thing that we're going to be looking for. Particularly, I think the ECMWF will be critical in around 2 or 3 days' time. So we may be on the way to a sudden stratospheric warming for the final week to 10 days of January, but at the moment, caution is required on that. Now, even without the sudden stratospheric warming, it looks like we are going to be getting some pretty cold weather coming up next week. So these are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. The red line here is a 30-year upper air temperature average. This is where we are right now, a little bit above average with the upper air temperatures, but of course under a ridge of high pressure, such as we are, which is actually centered to our east, but we're kind of in between really high pressure to the east and low pressure to the west, and we're in a bit of a no man's land. But under these kind of conditions, it's very still, very stagnant, and we're going to have problems with fog. So even though the temperatures are going to be a bit above average, actually it will be quite cool through to the weekend. But as we go through the weekend and into the start of next week, and that's this period just here, it looks like we're going pretty cold really. We're going under the average. It looks like we're going to stay there for quite a while as well. By the way, looking at the ensembles for Bolton in the north of England today. For precipitation, a lot of dry weather coming up over the next few days. It will be damp at times, particularly where we've got the fog, but overall quite a bit of dry weather coming up. And then towards the end of the weekend, the start of next week, turns much more unsettled. And those unsettled conditions, those rainfall spikes, continue through much of next week into the final week of January. So it does look like we're going to be turning increasingly unsettled and cold through the course of next week. There will be a risk of some wintry weather, particularly so for northern parts, but perhaps not exclusively so in the north. These are the surface temperatures. So this is 10 degrees just here. This is freezing just here. We've got plus 20 up there. We do well to reach that sort of level of temperature in January, and this is minus 10 down here. So we're starting off quite cool with temperatures probably around 5 degrees, maybe a little bit under 5 degrees for the rest of this week and into the weekend. Then there's a drop in temperature taking place for Bolton through into next week. And we're barely above freezing then for several days next week. Also with a risk of night frost as well. In fact, there's some very frosty nights appearing there, but those are outliers. But it looks like it is cold next week for northern England. I mean, we're talking about daytime temperatures, only 2 or 3 degrees at best, with a risk of night frost as well. For the final week of January, which is a very long way off, maybe a little bit of a tick up in the pressure. In the temperature, I should say, and possibly a little bit of a tick up in pressure to our south as well. Now, that is something that does tend to happen a little bit when you get a sudden stratospheric warming, the immediate response as these sudden stratospheric warming events are taking place is often to actually increase, it may seem a bit perverse, it's to increase the westerly and southwesterly flow and also to increase the zonal flow. That's the very initial response as a sudden stratospheric warming is happening. Then very quickly after that, as long as the warming propagates into the troposphere, then you start to rapidly reduce the zonal flow and you start to set up high pressure with a bubble of warm air essentially within the troposphere over the pole. Exactly where that bubble of warm air sits is the critical factor as to who gets the cold and who is on the mild side of the block. But the very initial response, and that would be from the GFS model anyway, it would be in this period around the 23rd, 25th of January, where these temperatures are just ticking up ever so slightly from where they are just there. The very initial response is often to increase the westerlies and turn things quite mild just for a few days as those sudden stratospheric warming events are taking place. So don't be surprised if that happens, but it doesn't necessarily mean we do get the SSW. It doesn't necessarily mean, although the initial response is mild, that we won't get cold from that sudden stratospheric warming. Temperature anomalies for next week. This going from the 10th to the 18th of January, coming out basically around average to a little bit cooler than average, particularly so for the north and west. So it remains quite a cold scene, really, for the northwest of Europe and for Spain and Portugal. As has been the case throughout the whole of winter so far, the warmer than average temperature anomalies are over in the east of Europe. Precipitation anomalies are looking like that. The week ahead, potentially 18th of January, generally average to a little bit drier than average. This is how the GFS is looking for Sunday. That high pressure over Scandinavia is still there and it's still trying to get in, but this low pressure around Greenland and Iceland is increasingly the dominating factors. A lot of very cold air associated with that low pressure, and it's deepening like mad. So by the time you get through to Monday, we're turning wet and windy across the country. And then as that rain clears through, follow the isobars back, and the air is originating from this area just here, which is sort of Canada, Greenland, and that cold air then is surging across the Atlantic Ocean. So as that wet windy weather clears away early next week, it turns a lot colder and showery. Then we go into a cold and showery spell on Tuesday. The winds are in from the northwest, so we're looking at wintry showers, probably snow showers for Scotland, Northern Ireland, and much of Northern England. Wintry showers possible in other parts of the country as well. And then we just keep those cold northwesterly winds going through next week. This takes us to Thursday, for example. And again, the winds remain from the northwest, so it looks pretty cold, it looks pretty wintry, particularly so, but not exclusively so, for the north. Heading up towards day 10, the wind actually turns into the north as this low pressure moves into the North Sea. So that's pulling down sort of Arctic northerly winds. And that's how we finish up at day 10, which is Saturday 20th of January. Building this ridge through the country. It is trying to extend back towards high pressure that's redeveloping over Scandinavia again. So that is actually trying to get winds back into the east and to the northeast as well. A little bit beyond day 10, we tried to move this weather front, this area of low pressure, in from off the Atlantic. That could be a snow event as it's coming up across, coming into and across the country, coming into that cold air. No point looking beyond that, really. We've gone further than we should. But it is generally an indication that we're going to be staying pretty cold throughout much of next week and wintry at times as well. This is how the East Central US is looking for Sunday. So we've got high pressure to our northeast, low pressure to the northwest, and that low pressure takes over early next week. It turns cold and windy with strong winds from the northwest. That's how things are looking on Wednesday in a week's time. Proper northwesterly gale blowing across the country, probably bringing heavy snow to Scotland, wintry showers, other parts of the country. That's an interesting little feature just there. Something's running in across England and Wales. On the northern side of that, it is cold, so that could be giving a bit of a dumping of snow, maybe to parts of northern England, Wales and the Midlands, but it's too far away for that sort of small detail. And then we go up to day 10. This takes us to day 10, which is Saturday 20th of January. And it's still looking cold then. The winds remain from the northeast, bringing more snow showers, particularly to Scotland and western parts of the country. The Canadian model agrees with all of this, so this is how things looking with the GEM. For Sunday, the high pressure is still trying to get wind into the east, but stays are numbered really. Low pressure comes in off the Atlantic, brings a wet and windy spell on Monday. And then we're into those cold north-westerly winds by Tuesday, and those cold winds continue into Wednesday. In fact, they continue throughout the whole of next week, looking cold and wintry across much of the country. That's how we finish up on day 10 with the GM, still a cold air mass. And this low pressure down here, if this came off, that would be coming up against that cold air, and I suspect that will be giving a dumping of snow to southern and western parts of the country. Don't take that too literally, but it is an indication that next week will be a cold week and it'll be increasingly wintry, particularly, but maybe not exclusively, for the north. And that's all before any southern stratospheric warming event occurs, so we're really not doing too badly even without an SSW. So if this stratospheric warming doesn't come to anything, even so, we're not really doing too badly this winter for cold weather in any case. Finally, just have a look at the Beijing Climate Center. So these are the 500 millibar height anomalies broken down into 10-day periods. The first 10-day period taking us from the 11th to the 20th of January. This looks quite cold, really. Got below average heights centering over the top of the UK. Above average heights are down long way to the southwest, and we've got a bit of a blocking signal up here as well. So that's entrenching cold air into that trough. And we know the winds are from the northwest out of Greenland and Canada too. That's a pretty good representation of what we've just been looking at. And the model does see this extending into the next 10 days as well. This is the 21st of January to the 30th. Again, that trough is centred over and to the east of the country. We've got a ridge through the Atlantic and extending up to Greenland as well. So once more, there's cold air extending into that trough. You expect quite a cold second half to January with some wintry weather at times, if that came off. This takes us to February, start of February. This is the 31st of January to the 9th of February. Below average heights over the UK again, above average heights up to the north. Possibly signs that the jet stream is rising a little bit further north here, so maybe it's starting to turn just a little bit milder there through the first 10 days of February. And then that continues into the next 10 days. This day's 31 to 40, long way off. 10th to the 19th of February. Heights continue to rise to the south. Below average heights are pushed up to the northwest. Jet streams rising north as well. How that would tie in with a southern stratospheric warming, I'm not sure. But then I'm always unsure about whether any of these long-range models are really able to take into account southern stratospheric warmings, because it's a very hard thing to model. I know that the UK Met Office's GLOSY 5 model is able to take into account the chance of southern stratospheric warming and the impacts of that. I think the SSW can as well, but these other products like the CFS and the Beijing Climate Center, I'm very dubious about whether those products are ever really able to pick up on a southern stratospheric warming until they occur, and then it can start to see what the impacts are. So that, with Beijing Climate Center, I think that's quite dubious, especially for February, if we was to get a genuine SSW. Right, so that rounds it all up then. So in terms of stratospheric warming, GFS is still going for it big time, as is several of the GFS Ensemble members. They're going for it as well. But we don't see any sign of it yet within the ECMWF, although it's still, ECM is still just before the time frame that we're interested in, around the 22nd to 25th of January. And the rumour is there's no sign of it within the UK Met Office's GLOSY 5 model either. So caution needed on the southern stratospheric warming. But in terms of the weather, next week still looks really quite cold with wind in from the northwest. Looks like we're going to have quite a cold and wintry week next week, with some snow potential at times, particularly, but not exclusively, perhaps, for the north. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.